Even though they give their life to this agency, as soon as they get hurt, management starts to treat them like they're,
Yes.
treat them bad.
Yes. They're the enemy.
Yeah.
They become the enemy.
And you probably have people in here complaining all the time about management, what the stuff they're doing.
It's crazy, the stories that they tell me about work. And now when I see our postal carrier come to my my home, I just feel so much different about them, because I know what they go through in a day, having to pack their own truck, having all the problems that they go through if they're having an issue, the issues that they have with their supervisors. So I have a completely different outlook, especially around Christmas time. How hard they're working at around Christmas time, like now. These workers, and it's not just the post office, but again, the people who work at the VA and the people who work at the airport and all these other patients that we treat. I have a renewed outlook on how hard they work, and in addition to how hard they work, and how little respect that they're getting for the job that they do.
Welcome to the Back to Work Melbourne podcast, where Dr. Dorfman is your federal workers' comp OWCP expert in Brevard County, Florida. In this podcast, you'll hear tips and tricks about the OWCP process, along with heartfelt patient testimonials from those we've helped get their claims approved. Tune in each week for insightful advice and inspiring stories that will guide you through your journey.
Good morning, everyone. We are back here at Back to Work Melbourne for our next podcast. Here today, we have the famous Ginny, who's sitting to my right, but she's not going to be filmed today. So instead, we have Chris, her bodyguard. So, Chris, great to see you today.
Glad to be here.
This is your first time here?
No, I've been here before. First time on the podcast.
Great to have you. You drove all the way in here just for the podcast?
Yes.
And then,
Yeah.
All right, I feel good.
That's what friends are for.
Let's have some fun today.
Yeah. Before we came on, we were talking about how we met. And I still don't know how. But I'm so thankful that we did. For everybody listening, not only is Dr. Dorfman a franchisee in Federal Injury Centers, but he also happens to be one of my very best friends.
Yes.
And so it's a real nice treat to be able to work with him.
We are having, great success here in Melbourne with Federal Injury Centers. Before we got here to Melbourne, there was nobody. So it's not like everyone was getting wonderful care here in Melbourne, Florida with their federal workers' comp. There was nobody.
Yeah,
so
they were getting no care.
They were getting no care. So when we first started, we were just seeing everyone who was just very thankful that finally there's somewhere here in Melbourne. And Melbourne's a big county, because you have Palm Bay and Melbourne and Rockledge and Titusville and everywhere here just in Melbourne. But we also started seeing patients, as I think our very first patient was from Daytona. So we see patients as far north as Daytona. There's been patients from Jacksonville that have come down here. We see patients from as far south as Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, and West Palm. And before we opened up an office in Orlando, we were seeing a great many people driving here every day from Orlando. And it was wonderful that they were driving here because they needed their care, they enjoyed their care. But since then, I've opened up an office in Orlando. So now all those patients in Orlando get to stay in Orlando, and they're very grateful for that. So now we see all these patients here on the East Coast, and they're really enjoying it.
They're grateful because of the results you're getting. To this point, since you started on day one, do you have any idea of how many accepted claims you've had?
Probably 3 or 4.
No. Hundreds,
Hundreds,
right?
Yes.
And before you got here, their claims acceptance rate was near 0.
Correct.
And they can't understand, why can't I get a claim acceptor? Why, my claims examiner's out to get me. No, they're not. Your doctor's doing a bad job.
Yeah.
That's a whole ballgame, is being able to write these narrative reports and get the claims accepted so they can actually get the help they need and get back to work.
And I do understand why doctors don't get their claims accepted, because
It's hard.
a lot of important information, not just of the injury itself, but how it happened, what's their job. There's many things that go into a report, which is why I can understand why most, if not all, doctors' offices don't get them approved. And when they don't get approved, the doctors can't treat the patient. The patients don't get what they need to get. And that's why everything just fails unless you get that patient approved.
On my end, recruiting new doctors to join the franchise, I get probably 10 no's, if not more, for every one yes, because it's hard. They start realizing, wow, this is federal, it's workers' comp, I don't want any of that, there's a lot of paperwork. And so it's really difficult to get people to join and, like you have, and help. Why did you do this to yourself?
Because for the exact reason that you just mentioned, because other people don't. And instead of doing everything that other people do, why not, even though it's more difficult, do what other people are not doing?
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with advertising. I learned a long time when I first became a chiropractor. Do what other people don't do. When I first became a chiropractor, I was advertising in Walmart. I had a little blood pressure table. And why was I doing that? Because nobody else wants to. Mm-hmm. And the same thing with federal workers' comp. Most doctors don't want to do it, not because the patients aren't wonderful, because they are, but the paperwork is a lot, and that's why they don't do it. So that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that other people are not doing.
And it's so confusing for the patient, too. But when they come here, you have a position called a case manager, right?
Three of
them.
So
having case managers in the office to guide the patients really relieves their frustration, their confusion.
Yes.
And that's something that's different from other doctors as well, is that you have decided to bring on extra staff that no other doctor would ever have because the patients need them. It's an incredible thing that you're getting done here. But one thing I was just thinking about is you were telling me a story, speaking of all the way in the beginning for you, right? You told me a story maybe a year ago about a mobile chiropractic clinic you had where you were...
Yes.
Tell people about that. It's a really interesting story.
With Dr. Jeff Solomon, way down in Miami Beach, I had a mobile chiropractic center. So I was seeing patients all day long at their place of business, at home, everywhere from Fort Lauderdale into West Palm. It was great because you're seeing patients that don't make it to the doctor's office because they're too busy working or they're in too much pain. They can't get to the doctor's office. So to make a difference in someone's life, even though it makes your life more difficult because you're working from early in the morning till late at night, even though it's making your life more difficult, you're making a big difference in someone else's life. For example, by being mobile, having a mobile chiropractic center, which was amazing. And Jeff still does it down in Miami, just making a difference in a person's life. And it's the same thing with the federal workers' comp. You're making a huge difference in a person's life because they don't know what to do. And they're in pain every day. And if they're working in pain every single day, and these people give their lives to the post office or to the airport or to the VA, they're giving their lives to these organizations. And, the minimum that they can do to give back to them is to allow them to treat and not just put up walls in front of them when they're trying to treat for the injuries. And these patients, they're not suing anybody. They're not suing the federal government. They just want treatment for the injuries that they're going through so they continue working because they do have a retirement at the end of the rainbow. There is a retirement for them if they can get there. And all they're trying to do is to continue working, treat for those injuries, and get back to work, or at least work without pain.
Yeah, and that's a area where injured workers, especially federal employees, there's like a stigma that they have to overcome because they feel if they report their injury, then automatically they're just going to be out of work and they don't want to be. And you're getting people back to work at a record pace, right?
Yes.
And I think that's important for people to realize that just because you report a work injury, just because you get therapy or go to the doctor, that doesn't mean you're automatically out of work. I think we understand that federal employees want to go back because they feel an obligation to their coworkers, right? If I'm out, then John over there is going to have to do double duty. And I think that's really interesting because I've done workers' comp in other areas, not just federal, where people want that to be vacation, right? I'm out of work. Please don't make me go back. But federal employees are really hard workers, and they all want to go back.
Right.
It's pretty interesting.
It's their life. And like you mentioned, it's their brothers, their sisters. That's how they talk to each other when they're here in the office. And they know that when they're not at work, they're making a more work for the people next to them. So they want to be there. They want to be working. But sometimes they just have injuries that are just not allowing them to either work as fast or not work at all. And yes, the stigma in workers' comp and other forms of workers' comp is oh, I hurt myself at work and now I don't want to be there. Now I'm getting paid not to be there. And that's not what federal workers comp is. Federal workers comp, these are patients that want to be back to work. I've never met one patient in all the years that I've been doing this. I've never met one patient that had said to me, I don't want to be working, or what do I do to stay out of work? They all they want to be working, but they just don't want to be in pain.
And you said it too, they give their life to their agency. And I think very literally, because you can be in a room with 100 federal employees and ask them with a show of hands, who's been at your agency for 20 years or more? And nearly the entire room raises their hand. Have you been with the agency for 30 years? And a shocking number of people have been with their agency for that long. But even though they give their life to this agency, as soon as they get hurt, management starts to treat them like treat them bad.
Yes,
obviously.
they're the enemy.
Yeah.
They become the enemy.
And you probably have people in here complaining all the time about management, what the stuff they're doing.
It's crazy, the stories that they tell me about work. Now, when I see our postal carrier come to my home, I just feel so much different about them because I know what they go through in a day, having to pack their own truck, having all the problems that they go through, the issues that they have with their supervisors. So I have a completely different outlook, especially around Christmas time, how hard they're working around Christmas time with these workers. And it's not just the post office, but again, the people who work at the VA and the people who work at the airport and all these other patients that we treat. I have a renewed outlook on how hard they work and how little respect that they're getting for the job that they do.
Yeah, and that's just going to get worse for them. This is peak season for most federal employees, but especially postal employees. Mm-hmm. They're delivering all the Christmas packages, and then after Christmas, they got to do all the returns. And a lot of injuries are happening during this time because they're just working so many more hours and there's so many more packages, I think. So they're getting hurt. I worry, because I see it every year, that during this time, someone's going to get hurt. Lots of people will get hurt and wait more than 7 days to report their injury.
Yes.
Because I need my overtime. And overtime's that's a big thing. And I get it. I understand. But if you're the rub some dirt on a crowd, you're going to lose your valuable benefits because of waiting.
Very few patients know all the great benefits that they do have provided to them if they fill out their paperwork
on time,
and if they report to their supervisor and do the necessary forms that no one tells them about. When they come here or when they call our case managers and we explain this form, that form, your CA1, your CA2, and all the various other forms that are important, oftentimes they have no idea.
Yeah, it's deer in the headlights.
What we're talking about, because nobody told them. They don't provide them with the paperwork.
There's not a training manual.
They don't provide them with a doctor.
Yeah.
And they're very appreciative when they get in touch with us. They usually find us either from a coworker who was nice enough to refer them in, or they found us on the website when they're a federal worker and they're injured. Just Googling words like that, they find us. But until they find us, oftentimes they didn't know what to do because no one told them.
No one told them. And the people that are responsible for telling them often give them information that's opposite of the truth.
Yeah.
I don't want to call it lying. One of the things I say about supervisors is they're either dumb or they're playing dumb, or both. Imagine being dumb and playing dumb.
There's two kinds. There's two kinds of supervisors. They're the ones that are exactly like that, and then there's others that I've found that are my patients. Mm-hmm. And
it's all fun and games until it's you.
And when they injure them, and now that they're injured, and they know how it really goes, and they see how they've been as a supervisor, how they feel from their supervisor above them, they will oftentimes change the way they are. And when one of their employees hurts themselves, they know exactly what to do. They know exactly what to do, not because they learned from one of their supervisors, but they learned exactly what to do because they learned it from their doctor.
Yeah, they learned it from you.
So they'll say, make sure you're filling out your CA1, make sure you're filling out your CA10, make sure you're at CA17, make sure you're here, give this form to your doctor. They know what to do because they've been through it. They learned from the doctor's office.
Yeah. Unfortunately, too many of them learn the hard way. Mm-hmm. And like I always say, you need the information before you're injured. Right.
Yes.
If you wait till the injury happens, man, you are behind.
And they're always sent to the emergency room.
Or an urgent care.
Which are great places to go to when you're injured. But when there's paperwork that needs to be filled out, they don't know how to do it. Right. So they're treating you correctly in the hospital, urgent care centers, but they don't know how to fill out that paperwork. So you might have gotten a little bit of medication that you needed, or you might have gotten a little bit of help for your injury, but it didn't take you any further into your workers' comp claim because they don't know how to fill out the paperwork.
Now the pain of the system is far worse than the pain of the injury.
Yeah.
And I've talked to hundreds of people who went to the ER and then got a bill in the mail because the billing people at the hospital don't know how to bill OWCP.
Correct.
And so now people are going, the injured person saying, what do I do now? I don't have the money for this. I thought the government's supposed to pay for it. They are. You just went to the wrong doctor.
Correct. And there are patients that treat for months that are still going through this, that they every now and then they do go back to the urgent care center or they go back to the ER. They still don't know what to do, and they haven't been injured for a day or two. They've been injured for months, and they continue to go back there because they haven't gotten the proper education. And when they finally reach us, they're like, wow, where have you been all my life?
Right here.
And not just us, the other federal injury centers, and finally give them the right information and get them right on into the office. And what I do when I see a new patient is not only do I speak to them first on the telephone, whether they found me on the internet or from a coworker, after they speak with our case managers and make their first appointment with our nurse practitioner, I make sure that I'm seeing them on that first visit after they see the nurse practitioner to answer any of their questions, making sure that now throughout the rest of the treatment, if they have any questions or any problems, they always have my cell phone number so they can reach me throughout this entire plan of treatment.
You're the most reachable doctor I've ever known. I've been doing healthcare for 30 years. And you're the only person I've ever heard of that gives out his cell number to everyone.
Yes. When I first became a doctor 25 years ago in Delray Beach, the chiropractor that I worked for, his phone would just go off like crazy. I have no idea who was calling him. His phone would ring all the time. I thought that made him important. Wow, he's so successful. He's so important. His phone is ringing 24 hours. I wanted to be that way. But no one's calling me other than my mom or dad. And so my phone's barely ringing. His phone is ringing off the hook. And on the very first day, I just started giving my cell phone to every single patient of mine. And I would just say to them, any questions that you have, unless you want to just make an appointment at the front desk, if you have a question about anything, just give me a telephone call. And patients would start walking into the office and say to the chiropractor who owned the office, they're like, did Dr. Dorfman just buy this place? Is he the new owner? Because he treats us much nicer. And I just learned on that very first day that if you give your telephone number to someone, you're just making a patient and a friend for a long time, because patients always have questions. And even though the front desk and case managers, they can answer their questions, it's nice that they enjoy having my phone number because they know that they can just ask a question. They're going to get it answered. If I don't have the answer, I'm going to get the answer and get back to them quickly. And especially nowadays with text messaging, it's even easier for patients to communicate with you. It's just so much easier for a person to have my cell phone number and us solve their problem or answer their question than not have my number at all.
Yeah, I love that. I wish I could get more people to do it. You're not just the most accessible, but you're probably the hardest worker. You're working Saturdays and Sundays, and you come in at 7 a.m. for people that need treatment before work.
I've always loved my job. When you're helping people, it just makes your life better, because that's your job of just helping people all the time. And when they're not getting help from other people, it just makes it that much better that they're coming to you.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine going someplace else, and not just because we're such close friends, but you're killing it. You're doing what people in this county have never seen done before. You're getting cases accepted. The hardest cases you can get accepted, they don't seem that hard to you, right? You've seen it all, almost. And I think people sometimes will say, gosh, this is just overwhelming. I got a denied claim, and there's no help for me.
I remember I had a patient come in here one time, and he had a claim not be accepted, but he was still treating with injuries and had been over 8 years.
Yeah.
And I remember asking you, what is the longest date that you know of that you've had in federal injury centers all over the country? And you told me it was about 8 years, or maybe a little more than 8 years. And this person was 8.5 years. And I knew we were going to get it accepted. And the only reason I knew it was going to get accepted is because he was really injured.
Yeah.
He's really injured. He just needed the right paperwork to be done and completed properly. And that's all we did, was we completed his paperwork properly. And I think within 2 or 3 months we had it accepted. So that's the longest one that I know to date.
8.5 years denied, and it took you a quarter of a year to get it fixed.
Yeah. It wasn't difficult because he was very injured. And when someone's very injured and they have all the documentation and they have the MRIs and they have other diagnostic testing and they've been going to doctors, it wasn't hard at all to get it accepted. We just had to put it all together.
Yeah, that's a lesson for everybody that's listening to this, that you don't need to needlessly suffer with denied claims, because we can fix it. And you probably have friends out there that are going through that right now. and you're letting them go through that. They haven't heard this yet, but you have. And so now it's your responsibility to let people know. And I found that when federal employees, especially like union members, I think they're really close, a tight-knit group, when they realize that they can solve a problem for one of their brothers and sisters, it's easy. So we just got to tell them. You got to go tell somebody. Don't let your brothers and sisters suffer needlessly with denied claims. It's unnecessary.
Yes. The patients, they really enjoy coming into my office.
Yeah, they're having a good time
handing me a Post-it with someone else's name on it, saying, hey, I spoke to my coworker. They know you're going to be calling them. And when I call, they answer. Or they get to my text message, and then we're just helping the next person.
And you talk to every new patient, don't you?
Everyone.
Every single one.
Yes. I speak to every patient just to make them feel nice and warm and comfortable that they have finally reached the right place.
Yeah, they're in the right place.
They've called so many people that deny them and say, no, I'm sorry, we don't do federal workers' comp. I explain to them that when they come here, you're going to see all the posters on the wall. You're going to see your YouTube videos, yourself and Ginny here at the front. You're going to know when you walk into this office that we treat federal workers' comp.
Right.
Because you're going to see the posters everywhere.
You're definitely in the right place. So let your friends know this is where you go when you have a federal workers' comp injury. Don't suffer needlessly at the urgent care. Don't go to the ER. You don't need to call an ortho day one. That's what they tell each other. You need an ortho. And then they say lawyer up. You don't need a lawyer. You need a good doctor. And this is where it's at. How do people call you?
They can reach me here in the office, 321-608-8888, or, of course, my cell phone that we've mentioned so many times, area code 954-818-3160. The office is 321-608-8888, my cell of 954-818-3160. And you mentioned orthopedic doctors. We work with a whole bunch of orthopedic doctors here and in Orlando. And orthopedic doctors, they do great work on your body, but they also don't know how to get the claim accepted.
And that's what they want.
So a lot of patients will automatically be injured, and they start calling to the orthopedic doctors. And they're 100% of the time, no, we don't do federal workers' comp. And because most don't, but they also don't know how to get the claim accepted. So even if they do accept federal workers' comp, they see the patient and can't get their claim accepted. So what we do is we make sure that we get that claim accepted and refer that right back to the orthopedic doctor. So a lot of time orthopedic doctors will contact us and say, hey, I've got this new patient, but other than treating them, I don't know how to do the paperwork.
Yeah.
So they'll refer the patient to us. We'll do the paperwork. We'll get them approved, send them right back to the orthopedic doctor so they can do what they do.
Taking 100% of the hassle out of the process.
Yes.
All right. You can also find Dr. Dorfman at www.federalinjurycenters.com. Check the locations tab. Scroll down to Florida. And then
Melbourne and Orlando.